Greetings, Hallowmaniacs. Today's video for our 31 Days of Halloween, we're going to take you to the Old Dutch Church in the cemetery of Sleepy Hollow. One of the most renowned short stories for Halloween is the legend of Sleepy Hollow and the Headless Horseman. We're going to take you to Washington Irving's final resting place, check out the cemetery, the church. So let's go ahead and let's get started.
All right, so nestled in the state of New York are two different towns that we're going to be talking about. Obviously, we're going to Sleepy Hollow, but we're also going to talk about the adjacent town next door, Tarrytown. So as we go into Sleepy Hollow and make our way to the cemetery, we're going to take a moment and talk a little bit about Washington Irving himself. So Washington Irving was born in New York City in 1783 and died in 1859 in Tarrytown at the age of 76. He is one of America's most renowned literary figures and focused a lot on short stories, biographies, and he also was a historian. One of the surprising things that I found out about him was that he was also an American ambassador to Spain in the 1840s. He is famous for writing a lot of biographies, including that of Oliver Goldsmith and George Washington, as well as writing a lot of several short stories, Rip Van Winkle, Old Christmas, and perhaps his most famous one being The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
In that story, it follows Ichabod Crane, who's a local school teacher, kind of gallivanting around the town of Sleepy Hollow, courting Katrina Van Tassel, who's a wealthy daughter of the Van Tassel family. He comes across Brom Bones, who does not like Ichabod whatsoever, and in the course of one night, comes across the Headless Horseman. We've seen a lot of adaptations of this tale through cartoon, through mainstream movies, Christina Ricci, Johnny Depp. The story lives on forever, and it's a classic tale of Ichabod Crane and what exactly happens when he encounters that Headless Horseman, who one given night chases Ichabod Crane across the bridge through the cemetery and hurls his pumpkin-like head at Ichabod himself. We're going to step foot into the cemetery now by the Old Dutch Church, and we're actually going to walk through and see Washington Irving's gravesite, and we're also going to check out the inspiration behind Katrina Van Tassel. She was not an actual person, but we did find the inspiration behind that character as we know it today.
So as we made our way into the cemetery, and just a little bit of word of advice, the grounds do close pretty early at 4:30 p.m. every day, at least when we were there. There's limited parking, so definitely arrive early, or you might have to check back in if you have a car and you want to be able to park, but there is some walking involved. One of the great things is there was a lot of labeling, so you could tell if you're there to see Washington Irving's grave, there was a lot of path markers and different signage that would help you be able to find it. So, when you first go into the one entrance, you're going to see the church up there, as well as a lot of different cemeteries. So up on that hill, this is where we're going to find the inspiration for the character Katrina Van Tassel, but also along up that hill, kind of the other direction, is where you will see the Irving family plot there. So kind of right by the church here and right by the road. One of the very first headstones that you're going to see up here is that of Eleanor Van Tassel. And this is actually the inspiration for Katrina Van Tassel. So one of the things that I did read and how they came up with the name Katrina was Eleanor actually had an aunt named Katrina, and that's where they think that Washington Irving actually used and got Katrina Van Tassel. So base it along, the looks and probably the characteristics of Eleanor, but also use the name of maybe her aunt. So probably a little bit of mixture there, but that was really great to see the inspiration. But moving along, if you are a history buff, you definitely have to check out the cemetery. There was so much history there. You could see Revolutionary soldiers and their graves that are still there. I mean, of course, it's been very worn down and degraded over time, but just to be able to see something like that is pretty amazing.
Now, when you're visiting, you have to remember, you have to be respectful, right? So this is kind of a tourist stop, but there's also the final resting place of many departed souls. So you can see the signage here, the Headless Horseman. And again, making sure that folks obviously know the legend, but also know the exact pathway to follow to get to Washington Irving's final resting spot. It was pretty well documented throughout the cemetery as to which direction you needed to head to make sure you found that final burial place of Washington Irving. Obviously, some of the signage here paying homage to the Headless Horseman and the legend itself. And as you make your way up the hill, and it's a little bit of a hike, right? It's not the easiest terrain. You are going to see the final resting spot of the entire Irving family, all in one centralized spot here.
So the day that we ended up visiting was actually picture perfect weather, and what a beautiful final resting place. I mean, this tree right here was so tall and had to be there for decades and decades. And, you know, the family plot along with Sunnyside, which was his residence, and the church were all made into national landmarks. And when Washington died at the age of 76, it was rumored that his last words were, "Well, I must arrange my pillows for another night. When will this end?" And then he died from a heart attack. And you can see his grave is located between the two American flags, and we'll zoom in here in a moment. But you can see that Washington Irving, you know, he died at the age of 76, but he died within 8 months of doing his last work, which was a biography on George Washington. So he stayed working pretty much right up until the end. I think it was his passion that really took him from being a writer and really fermenting his part in history and literature and making him this icon. One of the great things that he did, he was a real big advocate for other writers, and he wanted to make sure that having a career in writing was a legitimate profession. He really argued for and tried to protect and have stronger laws to protect writers from copyright infringement, and really was just an inspiration and really try to drive and make it possible for other people who had that same passion, that drive to be able to write, to be able to carry out and have a career just as he did.
So one of the things that did take me aback a little bit, as you can see me walking on the bridge here, is the actual bridge in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery is not covered, and it's a pretty short bridge, right? So the actual Sleepy Hollow bridge is outside the cemetery. It's concrete. It's not a covered wooden plank bridge like you would expect in the story. So that is one thing that you have to take into consideration and kind of separate outside of the story as well. The bridge isn't exactly like I expected it. But again, it's all about the inspiration that stems from it, right? If you combine it together, the length of the actual Sleepy Hollow Bridge with the cemetery having the actual wooden part of the bridge, probably was more or less what you would expect in the story. But it was a little bit different, a little bit eye-opening, but look at the tranquility and how peaceful it is in here. And you could still immerse yourself into the short story and still imagine Ichabod Crane being, chased by that Headless Horseman across one of these bridges, right? So that was pretty cool to see. Something to kind of step back and think about all the tales of this story and all the details of it.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think that yes, there's like the true bridge that you hear, that's concrete, I still definitely would think of this wooden bridge.
Right.
But definitely it was great to follow the footsteps, kind of see the final resting place of Washington Irving, see some of the inspiration from one of his most famous short stories.
And he was respected so much even overseas by other international authors, Hawthorne and some of these really big names that you've
Charles
read about.
Dickens, definitely, and also other American writers, many American writers such as like Edgar Allan Poe, they all looked up to Washington Irving because he was that icon and definitely just fermented his place in writing history. But here's Sunnyside. I did want to show a little bit. So Sunnyside is his residence that is built in the 1800s. He lived there. This is where he passed away. And you can actually still go to see Sunnyside today and actually step foot into Washington Irving's home.
So we really hope you guys enjoyed this type of video. It is a little bit different than what we normally do, but I thought it was really important, being a Halloween enthusiast, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow being one of those most iconic short stories out there that centers around Halloween and Halloween time, to kind of see where everything kind of came from. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Like we always say, there's going to be a lot more content here for the 31 Days of Halloween, some additional adventures. I think we're going to hightail it over to Salem next. We captured some amazing things while in Salem. So we really hope you guys are enjoying the 31 Days of Halloween. Make sure you like, subscribe, and remember, guys, to always stay spooky.
Trick or treat.